So I'm joined by Abhi Rajendran, who is the Director at Research and Advisory Group at Energy Intelligence. Thank you for joining me. To kick off, what are current conversations on the oil markets revolving around?
Yeah, great question. This is top of mind for everyone. Right now, everyone is worried about lack of supply coming out of Iran as a function of sanctions coming from the U.S. That's an immediate market focus. People are worried about how we supply the needs of the demand environment through the end of the year. And then looking to next year, there are other concerns out there too. Everyone calls it the fragile five. It's not just Iran, it's Venezuela, it's Libya, it's Iraq, and it's Nigeria. So people are worried about supply. On the demand side, people are worried about what level of prices causes demand destruction, and people are worried about emerging markets from a currency perspective and how that kind of fits into the outlook for 2019 as well. So it's a volatile time, lots of concerns on the supply and demand side, but it's the oil market. That's what we're always worried about.
And how does your view on the US from a supply and policy outlook fit into the global picture?
Great question. A lot of the supply concerns especially are being driven by the U.S. The drop-off in exports and volumes out of Iran is a direct function of U.S. policy. Now, we have a pretty dire view of how far that drop-off is going to be. But the other thing to keep in mind is, we're in mid-October now. In mid-November, we have a midterm election in the U.S. And the Trump administration is keenly focused on keeping a lid on oil prices and keeping a lid on gasoline prices and keeping consumers happy as they go to the ballot to vote. So I think that's going to play into it as well. As people start talking about $90 to $100 oil, our view is that there is going to be some cap. Again, a cap that's actually administered by the U.S. government that at the same time is putting out these policy issues. So policies is a key part of it. And for a world concerned about supply, we think, we see it as sort of a transient period where supply is an issue. It could be a quarter, it could be 2-3 quarters. But again, U.S. supply is quite abundant. This year the U.S. is adding 1.25 to 1.3 million barrels a day of just oil, plus NGLs and liquids on top of that. Next year, again, we're going to add 1 million barrels a day of oil, plus another 400,000 or 500,000 barrels a day of NGLs. And the U.S. is actually set to re-accelerate towards the end of next year into 2020. So for people concerned about supply, it's a transient period because over time the U.S. is there to fill the volumes. It's not going to be the only source to fill the volumes because there are questions around the quality of crude, how U.S. crude fits in with overseas refiners. But a lot of that supply will adjust and be there for the market.
Okay, so sticking with the US, could you tell me a bit more about what US focused companies are saying and what some of the current misconceptions are from the overseas community?
Sure. It's really interesting looking at it from both sides of the coin. From the U.S. perspective, you have companies that that are in this period of trying to accelerate growth, right? 2018, 2019, 2020. These are the 3 years that they're really trying to capitalize on their growth opportunities. At the same time, they're actually finding that deploying capital is becoming less and less efficient. And they're running into unforeseen bottlenecks, whether it's pipelines, oil field services, lack of labor and things like that. So those are some of the things that U.S. focused companies are spending most of their time on. Now, despite all of these issues, we actually factor this into our forecast. So our outlook for 1+ million barrels a day per year of supply of just oil already bakes this in. And so we think U.S. companies are going to be fighting through this and bringing that supply to the market over the next couple of years. On the international side, we still get a lot of questions on what shale can actually produce. So there are a lot of questions around what are the numbers per year that the U.S. can really justify, and which is surprising to us, just kind of given how far and how mature the shale revolution is in the U.S. But then there's also questions around, okay, there's a lot of oil coming online, and then the U.S. is obviously trying to, become a big exporter and then dominate the market. Is that feasible? What's the market look like? And we have some views around that too, where we think especially through 2020, You can fit in a lot of U.S. incremental oil into the global system, but beyond 2020, once U.S. exports get to 4 or 5 million barrels a day, it starts getting tougher. So, the marriage between U.S. supply and international outlets is going to become tighter and much more closely followed. And again, that comes back to policy. So that's going to have to cooperate to make it work.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And just to conclude, so this is the second year that we've had a gas day at Oil and Money. How do you think the US gas supply dynamic fits into the whole energy conversation?
Yeah, US projects, or US and North America projects, are 70-75% of the pipeline of LNG projects that are out there. Similar to how quickly oil supply is ramping up in the US, gas supply is as well. We're adding 8 to 9 BCF a day per year of gas the next few years. That slows down obviously in 2020 and beyond, but it's a lot of gas. And eventually it's gas that needs the next wave of LNG to get built. And to get built, that wave needs to start getting sanctioned almost immediately. So, U.S. LNG is going to fit in to the global LNG picture. It's going to be a critical part of it, mainly because it's still among the lowest cost options, and people are more comfortable with the security of supply now from U.S. gas. But again, U.S. LNG projects have to face two kind of critical obstacles before making it to the finish line. One is policy. We're coming back to that. LNG exports are kind of firmly in the crosshairs of trade dynamics and disputes with China. They are certainly embedded in trade situations with the European Union as well. So projects are going to have to overcome that. And if they do and find buyers, the buyers are what are ultimately needed for these projects to move ahead, because without buyers, they're not going to get the banks to come and sanction the projects. And and you're starting to already see movement from other parts of the world, like Qatar Petroleum, like LNG Canada. Certainly Russia is involved in it as well. So they are a horse in the race that's fast, but there are other horses in the race as well.
Great. Thank you for your time, Abhi. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much.